Okay, good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock. It is 4:02. I'm sorry. On Monday, January 24th. Good to be back. For those that are just joining us, we'll wait a few minutes to let people log on, but this is our first podcast in quite some time. So, just I think the last one was just after maybe the end of November. So we're just getting back to this, and we'll probably take a few episodes to get back into the swing of things and talk about what's going on. But there's a lot going on, so there's a lot to talk about. I appreciate so many of the messages that came in. I took some time to, after the last election, to kind of slow down a little bit, focus on other business things and ventures that I have, the marketing side of Atticus News, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I do want to get back to doing these podcasts on a regular basis. We are reaching a point from a news standpoint when we have Corona, where we have state offices opening up, state rep election coming up this year, a lot of notifications, a big governor race coming up. So a lot of these notifications are coming in. So news is happening. On the Brantford front, to those that are from Brantford watching, there's not a ton. I mean, it's post-election. We have some meetings on fields or some development meetings happening. But the point for this week, I think, is just to have general conversations. If there's questions, if there's comments from anybody, come on. One of the small changes we're going to have here, and one of the hard things for me is to have a 4 o'clock podcast that's in the middle of the day. And so often there were things happening, so I was inconsistent with being on every day. So my goal is to be live as often as possible, but there will be times that I'll record a podcast early on and post it at 4 o'clock. So we may not always be live. So I'll start off by saying we're live, so you know, and you can comment and go back and forth. But just for the sake of, I have other things to do to make money and have a business and make life happen. I can't always be here at 4 o'clock. So some of these podcasts will be recorded earlier. We also today did not have a sponsor, but we normally have a sponsor, one of our business. We're picking up a lot of our marketing and advertising efforts with the Atticus News marketing side of the business. So you'll see a lot of other things. Also on Brantford 7, you'll see a lot more business articles. So we'll always do politics. We'll always do news in the area, things of that nature, but a lot more articles that have to do with business, business analysis, the stock market, real estate, things of that nature, as we are forming growing partnerships with local businesses along the shoreline. So some changes that I've been working on for the last 2 months, really before that time that I have not been on the podcast. Obviously, we also had our holidays. My tree is still behind us. There's still a bunch of stuff on there. So it was good to go through that. But so to those here, yeah, Terrell, thank you. Glad to be back. Paul, good to see you as well. And Kim, good to see you as well. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for coming on. So just from a standpoint of, what's going on in the world, we are looking at some changes on representation in Brantford. We have an election coming up this year. We have Scanlon has thrown the biggest kind of wrench in it because he's announced he's basically running for comptroller. They formally file that they're running an exploratory committee. That's just the first step from a funding standpoint to make that happen. And other people, Democrats have already announced they're going to seek that seat as well. And so it's interesting. We'll talk about Scanlon because clearly anybody who knows him and has watched him serve the 98th district, which is most of Guilford, and then the Pine Orchard, Stony Creek areas of Brantford. I am a fan, for lack of a better word. I think he's honest, which is my number one criteria when it comes to elected officials. I know there are people who are not fans. He's a Democrat. There's a political aspect to that, sure, but he's been honest, and I agree with much of what he's fought for. He's always been very responsive to the constituents I've spoken to. That said, it's pretty clear to anybody who's ever seen him or talked to him that this is somebody who is not long for that seat. This is somebody who is clearly hoping and has higher aspirations. Kind of seems like that natural-born politician. Well-spoken, clean cut, clean family, all that kind of stuff. And he is. Those seem legitimate. I have not seen any reason to question that persona. It seems authentic and real. And so he's done some very good things, in my opinion, representing the district. And he has also moved up the ladder very quickly in Hartford. And so that's why I kind of question this move to go to comptroller. Comptroller, for lack of a better word, is an accountant. And they handle the financial goings-on of the state. So does it make sense for somebody who has been pushing policy, child tax credits, healthcare for more. He's worked on things like insulin costs for those with diabetes. He's worked on a variety of things that take legislative acts to happen to now say, wait, I'm going to run for comptroller. Now, this is his decision. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but these are the questions that I raise. If this somebody, one, nobody runs to become comptroller, right? Like no one gets up one day and says, I really hope I'm going to go to school and go up the political ladder to become comptroller. Nobody does that. You may want to be Rosa DeLauro. You want to be Chris Murphy. You want to be president of the United States. You want to be a congressman or a senator. Nobody says, I can't wait to be comptroller. So this is clearly in a calculated decision to say, will this help me get to whatever the next step is? U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, governor, whatever it is. And I do question that. And I kind of want the best for Sean. I think we do need honest people in politics. But I question if he can be as effective changing policy as he has been working up the ladder. And he's the chair of the Finance Committee in the House, which is significant, which is a lot of power. And so this move to run for comptroller is a bold one. It's not an easy decision to make. If he was running for even Secretary of State, has a larger footprint, a name recognition overall in the state. Things like Attorney General William Tong certainly has more. Does comptroller do that? With Kevin Lembo, the previous comptroller, really a household name to the point that he could have used that to become something larger. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that. It's going to be an interesting question moving forward. That said, that's the choice he's made. I believe he probably could have done more in the position he's in, moved up that ladder, pushed he is a kind of universal health care guy. He's a child tax credit guy. He's been pushing things that are popular. I think more time in that position as the chair of the Finance Committee would have been beneficial and would have helped him grow that statewide name that he needed. So it's an interesting decision. We'll be watching closely. That said, from a national level, everything is going Republican. People we're showing terrible approval numbers for Biden. I think people are tired of a lot of the COVID stuff, the political correctness stuff. They're getting tired of the far left, and you're seeing all the numbers start going more towards Republicans. And so that's normal. Obama had to deal with this. Trump had to deal with this. Winning an election, then the next midterm, losing a lot of support. This happened before. So that's happening with the national sentiment going more Republican overall. And so will that make a difference in a Connecticut comptroller race? Probably not. We also have the right now, Lamont is fairly popular. He's done, by every account possible, a very good job managing through this. There's some questions now about extending executive powers, but he has not done a bad job doing that. So it's an interesting political question. What do? Do you run for comptroller to get state office? Just take that step up if you're Scanlon, or do you stay in the state rep position where you're going to do more politically, could have more impact politically, probably on people's lives and actual policy? I don't know the answer to that, but it's fascinating because there's so many variables. If this was a blowaway Obama election coming up, no problem. You got it slam dunk, doesn't matter. But it's really not. Republicans could make up some gains, interestingly, in the House. Will they win this seat? Probably not. Guilford's gone fairly far left in the last, even just couple years. Branford's more blue collar, but they'll vote at state and national level more on a Democratic vote there. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's a very good political discussion to be had between now and November on Scanlon's decision. And then years out, does that help? Will that help him become a U.S. congressman or governor or a much higher level that he clearly has born? I mean, he's been wanting to do that forever. I don't think that's any inside information. Everybody knows that. So, yes, Anda, I am back. Thank you. Geraldine, I don't know. No one else has said that I'm breaking up. I've gotten a few messages on my phone here saying, hey, you're back. But nobody's mentioned that there's not, that anything's breaking up. So maybe just reconnect, disconnect, reconnect, what have you. To those just tuning in, this is live, so I do go back and forth with some of the audience. If you're just tuning in also, early on I said this, My goal is to be live as often as humanly possible. It's not always possible. So I'm going to err on the side of making sure we have something aired at 4 o'clock every day. So there may be times that I record this earlier in the afternoon, late morning, what have you, try to keep it on topics of the day and then post that at 4 o'clock. So I'm going to try to be live most of the time, but to make sure we have some consistency. That was the number one complaint I got all the time. At 4 o'clock, I'm waiting for you and you didn't show up. So I want to try to fix that as much as I can. Okay. I didn't plan a lot to talk about, but we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the stock market. And if you have followed this podcast for some time, you know it's something I talk about on a very regular basis. It's something I invest in. It's how I make most of my living. I'm not wealthy by any means, but it's how I pay bills. This podcast does not make a ton of money, if you're wondering that. And Brantford 7 really doesn't either. I'm working on that, but it doesn't either. That said, last year, the last 2.5 years, since that crash in March 2020, has been spectacular. It was hard to lose money. You could have purchased anything back in March of 2020 when COVID fully shut down the country, shut down the world really, and made money. Even if you picked bad stocks, you found a way to make money. God help you if you picked good stocks, because if you picked Tesla or one of those, you made 4 or 5 times your money. But if you want a good indication of what the stock market's done and what's happened recently, where some stocks did spectacular during the shutdown and now are really, really getting crushed, there's a few reasons for that. One is it was a company only based on the shutdown. It was only successful because so many people were staying home. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, open up your browser and type in the words Peloton stock. And look at the 5-year chart of Peloton stock. And you want to see just an amazing, like, holy cow drop. This stock at the end of 2020 was $162.72. And I can tell you, and I never bought it because I never bought into it. I should have shorted it. So I'm not saying I played this perfectly. I should have shorted it then. But even at 160, people were rating it a buy, meaning they thought it was going to 180 to 200 or significantly higher. And now it's under 30. And it's up today, by the way. It was in the 25s coming into today. It's up today on a little bit of an uptick. But that's what that last couple of years meant, that things were flying up so high with long-term expected gains that when people realized, wait a minute, a lot of these gains just have to do with we're shutting down as a country. And in shutting down as a country, people are staying home. They're spending on things for their house. They're spending on bikes or weights or whatever in their house. There was a time you couldn't go to Walmart and get weights because people had bought them up like crazy. So the last 2.5, 3 weeks have seen a massive, especially tech sell-off. Why tech? When we evaluate a company, we look at how many times future earnings it's worth, right? So suppose I have a company that does $1 million in sales and it makes $100,000 a year in profit. Well, we may say, well, that company is worth 5 times future earnings, or $500,000, or 10 times future earnings. So I talk a lot about a company called Viacom, which owns CBS and Paramount Plus. They're trading about 5.5 to 6 times future earnings. That's cheap. Compare that to Netflix, which is trading at 50 to 60 times future earnings. Companies that have these huge evaluations of future money are getting destroyed today. Look at Amazon. If you open your browser back up, it did have a comeback today, that's true. But over the last week, Amazon, look at it. It bottomed out today at $27.15. If you go to a year, the last year it was high 3696 on November 18th. From that time, it's dropped from 3,700 to a low of 2,800, basically. So it's losing a ton of it. Why? They're profitable, but the valuations were so high that people are saying we don't want to take a risk anymore. We've also talked in the past, and I don't know how much people remember past podcasts about inflation. And I try to talk in a way that people who do not normally follow the market or financial issues can understand. Inflation, what it does is it takes away future buying power. $100 now, 10 years from now, we'll be able to buy a lot less. The higher that rate of inflation, the lot less you're going to be able to buy. So when you see a company like Amazon, which has these huge earnings coming in future years, suppose it's going to make $1 million. Well, when inflation goes from 2% to 5%, that $1 million has much less buying power. And by having less buying power, when we go back to evaluate it, we have less overall on the value of the company. You can't buy as much. And so you're seeing all these tech sell-offs like crazy. Now, you did see today was a great day. If you bought stock around 11 o'clock, you did phenomenal. You had a great day. And I actually did. I added to Viacom around 11:30. That ended up being a really nice move. It has a long way to go. I think Viacom's a $45 stock. But that said, overall this year, a lot of concerns happening. A lot of stuff with international, a lot of stuff with Biden uncertainty. We have an election coming up that'll be uncertain. Inflation numbers going crazy. There's a lot of questions that are pushing this market down. And on top of that, just in a general sense, the market was overdue to come down. It had gone up 2 years without any sort of correction. And really before that crash in March 2020, which was not due to normal financial issues or economic issues, it was due to COVID, it had gone up for a long time as well. So not really surprised by that. But that's going to be the big issue we have coming into this election. How do people feel about the economy? Do they feel like Biden's doing a good job? Right now, the answer overwhelmingly is no. Can he turn that around? And that will very much decide who controls the Senate, which is 50-50 right now. It'll decide if he can pass anything after the midterms. So right now, he was unable to pass the Build Back Better plan because of one senator, really two, but one senator, Manchin, would not pass it. The numbers got far, far too high. What the Democrats did with the Build Back Better plan, I don't know if you want to call it sneaky or dishonest or just like, come on, it's math. Come on. They would cut back. It was a $4 trillion plan. They cut back to $2 trillion because of Manchin. Really, all they did was made it a less time frame. So instead of doing 10 years, they did 2 or 3 years. It basically said, well, if we only do it for 2 or 3 years, it's not going to cost as much for 10 years. So we'll just leave it on the next generation or a few terms down the road for them to refill it, knowing that once people have all these benefits, they're not going to want to give them up. So let's put pressure on Congress 2-3 years from now to re-up this plan. That way, the plan we pass now costs less, but we firmly believe long term it's going to pass. Well, Manchin didn't buy that, and it didn't pass. And then Biden said they're going to work together. Manchin came out last week and said it's basically done. We'll see if anything passes. I'm kind of hoping something does because I have some stocks that would benefit greatly from that. But that's just me. So yeah, I mean, that's from a discussion standpoint. I'm going to ask you guys to send in topics that you want to talk about. If there are things on your mind locally we want to talk about, I am going to talk one time this week about Fields and Brantford. That's been a question that people have asked about. I know the Board of Education is talking about that. I know the town has had like an ad hoc committee getting together, some department heads talking about Fields and the needs and what is there. It's an interesting thing when we have the Board of Education doing something because the Board of Education can talk about it all day long, but they don't have money. The money comes from the town. So I always question when Hernandez or the board starts doing something, they can talk about that need all they want, but eventually they have to go to the first selectman. They have to go to the Board of Finance. They have to go to the RTM to make that money, to get that money appropriated to that project. It doesn't make any sense to me for them to have those conversations without townspeople, RTM members, as part of the process. So it's great that you have a Board of Education. That's wonderful. And if you're talking about what math program to put in the 3rd grade, great. But if you're talking about something that requires approval from a different body, wouldn't it make far more sense to start including members of those other bodies as part of your negotiations? I would rather have a plan put together that has a 90% chance of passing as opposed to 50-50 going to members that you did not include and say, here's why we need this. I think the Board of Education is a little bit lost when it comes to the Fields, maybe taking guidance from Hamlet Hernandez, the superintendent, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to work together. You cannot have your own fiefdom. You have to work together, and you have to work with the people who have the money. Period. If one person is responsible for paying for the fields, you're best off having those people part of those negotiations early on. My issue with Brantford and the Board of Ed right now is you're having those negotiations, and I'm not seeing direct involvement from the people who are going to vote to pay for those fields. That's what's missing. And hopefully, now the first selectman has been a little more proactive in putting a committee together, knowing eventually the Board of Ed is going to come forward. So we need to have what we need on the town side, but if they're not working together, if the Board of Ed is working on its own, then hoping to get money later, that's going to be a much more uphill battle to make that happen. In any event, we will talk more about that in a future podcast later this week. So, and I just want to update you on, people ask this on a regular basis. News media is struggling. I picked up a copy of the East Haven Courier. Now, I don't read the Sound. I don't get it in the mail. I picked up a copy of the East Haven Courier. I could have counted maybe 2 ads, and it is thin as I've ever seen. The New Haven Register, same thing. Media is absolutely struggling. When I started Brantford 7, it was not to be a business. It was to be my political involvement for the most part. I was a member of the Democratic Town Committee. I didn't want to be there. Not because I didn't want to be a Democrat, but because I didn't want to blindly hate the other side. It didn't make sense to me. I've told this story before. I worked for the Young DeRoss campaign in 2009. After working on I wasn't paid by DeRoss. It was just as a volunteer. After working on Obama's campaign in 2008. And so, after the election came and DeRoss won easily, I'm sitting in a Board of Selectmen meeting, and the Republican who we ran against was John Opie. And if anybody knows John Opie, he's probably one of the most, I think he works for an engineering firm. He's one of the most reasonable, level-headed, logical people you'll ever meet. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I went door to door telling people that this guy was the bad choice. And I'm listening to him make sense and be logical and be reasonable. And I knew then that I didn't want to be told, you have to pick the Democrat because you're a Democrat. You're a member of the Democratic Town Committee. And being a member of the Democratic Town Committee or a member of the Republican Town Committee comes with that. You will help whatever the party endorsed person is. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to give up my right to think for myself in that situation. So I left and I started Brantford 7. Then it became a business because the audience grew. People were asking to advertise. We put them on there. It was never hugely profitable. We got to a point that I hired a few people. There was money coming in to pay for them. But then COVID destroyed it. We lost every advertiser during COVID. And so now the question is, how do I build this back up? And so I'll tell you right now what I'm doing. I'm going to take this year and give it everything I got. I'm going to write a ton of articles. I'm going to cover news stories. We're going to do a lot of analysis, a lot of editorial stuff, get content out there, cover Brantford, Guilford, Madison, the shoreline, grow it on state and national issues. You're going to be able to read as much of me as you want. And I'm going to go out as a marketing firm and sell the marketing that we have. We reach an audience. We reach a very large audience, actually, in Brantford. We're well-read. We have a loyal audience. We have the most engagement of any news site. And that said, we'll offer more than just ads. We'll do social media management, work with you on strategy, and I do a lot of marketing consulting as well. This year, my goal is to see how profitable I can make a media company on this level. We're not Hearst, but with all of the issues happening for media, with people not advertising nearly as much, with traditional print media, with traditional media, with Facebook and Google and all these large companies taking away those ad dollars. Therefore, you get garbage news. You're not getting anything of substance. You're getting ridiculous articles. The articles in New Haven Register were on the Connecticut Mirror 3 days earlier. They sell news to each other. So you may have 3 different news organizations, the same article. You're not getting a difference of opinion. You're getting the same thing repeatedly. They're getting smaller. There's just no revenue coming in. I feel bad for them because we're all better off when we have a lot of different opinions, different writers, what have you. The better writers are being let go for young kids. 22, 23-year-old kids out of college are being hired to cover towns they know nothing about, issues they know nothing about. And so can I fix that? I don't know. And I mean that. It's a little scary. I don't know the answer to that question. But this year, my goal is to give it everything we got. And if we can get past Christmas this year and say, listen, it didn't work. There just wasn't enough. Media's changing too much. Facebook has destroyed us. Amazon, all the other advertisers have destroyed us. That's where business is going. So be it. But if we can talk to people about our competitive advantages, one advantage we have is we have the social media page and the presence that we can take your business and push you. We have a site where we can put articles about you, talk about the changes in your business or whatever it is that you're doing or your nonprofit, what have you. We have a huge advantage over traditional marketing firms by having this media outlet. Will that model work? I don't know. But I'm going to ask for your support. Share it. Talk to others about us. If you know businesses that are looking to advertise or need help with marketing or consulting, share it. Send us that information. We'd be glad to reach out to them. That's what helps the news side keep up. That's what helps keep the podcast on. That's what helps us hopefully hire more people and grow. I don't know what the final answer is. For now, I make a living trading stocks. I'd like to be able to have a long-term viable media company with Atticus News and Brantford 7. I don't know if I can. With your help, it's possible. And I have to grow it beyond just Brantford, but that's the goal for this year. So I just want to be as transparent as possible about what we're doing. Traditional media has always kept the ad sales side and the media side, the editorial side, separate. So the people writing the stories had nothing to do with the ads going next to them. Unfortunately, we can't do that. We can't afford to have two different sides. So I do both. And at times, can that bring up some sort of conflicts? Yeah, if there was a scandal involving a local business, for example, that might. But at the end of the day, I think there's a potential here. And the response I've heard from people in Brantford, even in Guilford, of we need this, we want to hear more from you, we want to hear more unbiased approach to news. I think what I bring to the table is understanding finance, economics, and politics has been a huge help because a lot of people who know politics don't know anything about the world, nothing about economics and those decisions, those impacts. So I'm seeing this is a trial for me too. When it first started, it was okay, we can make money selling ads. We have the audience, they want to reach the audience, let's get together. But you can get an ad on Facebook for $50 and probably reach more people. What you can't do is have somebody who can help you with your social media page create content that other people can't create from people who know how to create content that reaches people, as I do all the time, and then take it and then also put that content on our Brantford 7 page. For example, a feature on a new business, and some of these you're going to see, a feature on a new business in town. And we work with that person. We write the article, we post it to our social media pages, we put all the keywords that we need into that, then also share it to Brantford 7. So they get far more times that audience than they ever would have had before. Other marketing companies can't do that. They don't have that advantage locally. We're going to take it for a ride. And if there are suggestions, if there are ideas, if there are businesses we think we should be working with, please send it on. Jack, why do you think experienced writers being exchanged for youngsters in local news? Well, you've seen the Sound and the Courier. You've seen those papers, open them up and look for ads. And if there's any chance that you have one of those papers from 5 years ago, open it up and look at the ads. It's night and day. It's not even close. The revenue's just not there. So you had a drop in print revenue anyway, right? You already had that. Then COVID came. So here's what's happening when it comes to traditional advertising. We have one of the largest audiences along the shoreline, right? Brantford 7. We have, especially in Brantford, a lot in Guilford as well, a little bit in East Haven, some North Brantford, but in this area, in this 10, 15-mile radius, Brantford 7 very likely has the largest audience. I would say Patch probably has greater numbers, but Patch is tying in from the whole world. So Patch is one of 1,000 websites all over the country. They link to each other. So the numbers aren't real numbers. We don't do that. Businesses that used to advertise pre-COVID just wanted business. We got more people in the door, get that word out. Now they're busy, but they don't want to advertise because they don't have staff. So the restaurants, which were a core part of what we did, are saying, Steve, I'd love to advertise with you. We have empty tables. I don't have servers. I don't have kitchen staff. And the last thing I want to do is overload those people so that they're stressed out and don't come back. That's what's happening now. On top of that, especially if you're restaurants, the cost of chicken has doubled. The cost of bacon has doubled. But your meal hasn't doubled. Because a lot of those restaurants, a lot of those businesses are not passing on the full extent of those costs onto you. So their food has gone up to you 20, 30, 40%. The cost of the food has gone up 80, 90%. That's no joke. I've seen the invoices. That's what's happening right now. And everybody's getting squeezed for that reason. So I'd love to help these companies. They don't want the help right now. So there are other areas we can help them. We can help them with social media management. I mean, who's better at reaching audiences than people who spend all day reaching audiences with news and covering stories that matter? And so that's helping. We have more people reaching out to us so that we're talking to more companies on those things. Who's better at writing articles? People who write articles. So we have some competitive advantages over the average marketing firm. And we have an advantage over media in that we don't have a print publication. So we don't have those costs of printing weighing us down. But at some point, I do have to hire another journalist who I trust and I think is going to carry along the same kind of brand that we do. And we need to grow. So I appreciate it. All the support you can get. If you know of a business that needs help, send them over. I'd love to have a conversation with them, see how I can help them and make this grow. This is a 12-month period where I'm putting everything in. And let's see what happens. Okay. I just want you all to know what the business side of this is and what it looks like for the next 12 months. That said, it is 4:34. It is great to be back. I'm glad to see comments coming in. It's just good to be interacting again and getting back into the swing of this. We'll do the best we can all week. I will probably be live all week. And then next week, maybe 1 or 2 days will be recorded just to make sure we have something at 4 o'clock that is timely. So that said, guys, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And until then, have a great night.